is it better to be free or assailed by temptation? Results alone can determine the question as to whether it's more profitable to have temptation or not. To be assailed by temptations and to resist them manfully is a mark of real virtue. And to master them utterly is a truly glorious triumph. On the other hand, life moves more peacefully and securely without their dangerous presence, and to expose oneself to them knowingly and recklessly indicates a lack both of sense and of strength. Where, however, interior faults are in question, such as anger, envy, or vainglory, it's a good thing sometimes to brace oneself deliberately, to a contest. So when it has to do with anger, envy, or vainglory. By, for example, remaining in the company of people who irritate us or who go out of their way to be disagreeable, in order precisely that we may learn to be patient, or again, by freely placing ourselves under the rule of some strict master, quick to repress every show of self-will in order to learn in such a school prompt and humble obedience. But what is a reasonable course to pursue in such instances as these is entirely foolish and fraught with utmost danger where temptations of the flesh are in question. Meaning, it's just one that keeps coming up with it. You don't go swing dancing if you because you're trying to overcome impurity. Or use the internet. Or think that you can start walking around looking at whatever you want in the library because you're trying to overcome curiosity. Doesn't make any sense. Certain things, obviously there's just certain things that there's no contest there. There's concupiscence that will overcome you because it's always that simple example of a fire. You either have the fire that you're adding to with virtue of prayer, and that cultivates intimacy with God because it makes you desirous of holy things. Or it's that fire of concupiscence. And if you add to it, so that's why you can't confront. This is what Gandhi did. Gandhi. I know you'll find in Chicago statues of Gandhi and Martin Luther King, and they're saints, in Chicago. But Gandhi, when he wanted to overcome the flesh, he went and got a prostitute and then just sat with her all night long. That's not a good idea. Maybe Gandhi could do it because Gandhi in Chicago is holy. But normally that's not a good idea to do. You don't go and try to overcome lust by getting a prostitute. That's just not a good idea. Not a good idea. Because the fire, when you add to that fire, it's a real act of humility, and that was what was lacking in, I hate to say it for people in Chicago, but it's what was lacking in Gandhi. Seems there was a display of humility, but interiorly there was this kind of proud confrontation with where we don't need to get into that. With concupiscence, you don't proudly go up and confront those things where man's weakest. So that's what he's talking about here. We're not going to go up and confront proudly the passions of lust. No, we flee from those. You flee from those things, and you just keep fostering, because you can only foster one fire at a time. You either have a fire of devotion and prayer, or you have a fire of flesh and concupiscence. And your actions are the fuel put on that fire. So either you're cultivating the love of God through prayer, and that's cultivating that fire, that burning fire within. You hear about all the saints, that's that seraphic spirit. Because everything that they're doing, their thoughts they're putting towards God, their actions they're putting towards God, their reading they're putting towards God, everything's directed in a particular way to keep fostering that fire. When people call and say that they're just constantly dead inside from lack of prayer, it's usually because there's no cultivation of the fire. Now there's a difference, obviously, there's a difference between dryness or aridity that comes from prayer because they're going through a stage of the prayer life, and someone who feels, because you can be arid and dry and feel on fire for God. I shouldn't use the word feel, because it isn't a feeling, but have this desire for God that's unquenchable, even though they feel nothing. So, but the point is, feelings aren't that fire. That unquenchable desire for God's the fire, but it's not a feeling. Whereas the concupiscence, once that fire rages, that other fire goes out immediately. There is no fire for love of God and fire for concupiscence. Now the flesh can feel particular, it can, when it's being tempted, it can feel drawn towards as though there's a fire. Well, that's a human thing that's inside the body. But it's not consuming the mind. It's not consuming the heart. The body feels something. Well, that doesn't matter. You just keep fostering that fire for God and ignore what the body's doing. It's just kind of like the donkey on the mountain is just being sluggish. But you got to get to the top, so you start to beat the donkey until it goes up the hill. I always think of the Grand Canyon, because I think they still use donkeys there to go down to the hotel that's in the basement of the Grand Canyon. So then they have to get all the way back up, and they need a donkey to do it. But if you got to catch a plane, you're going to want to smack the donkey a couple times if he wants to just keep stopping and eat stuff, because the donkey's got to go up, and I don't know. It maybe it's 5,000 feet? What is it to the bottom of the Grand Canyon? But anyways, if you put in the mind the simplicity of the fire, then you understand what you can go against, what you can't. Patience and all that's different. That can make us upset or whatever, but those are things that you can fight with inside. Whereas the passions of lust and things like that. I mean, anger, if you think you're going to pummel this guy, it's better to walk away. You don't keep staying in a situation where all you want to do is pull out a knife. Not a good situation to be in. But if that's the idea, you're probably in the wrong place. Right? They had that in Mother Angelica's community. She talks about it in her early life. Raymond Arroyo made that book about her, and there was a sister chasing her around the house with a knife. I was thinking, maybe sister's in the wrong place, because I can understand having some faults and things, but that's more than a fault she had. Grabbing the knife and chasing somebody is pretty bad. I mean, that's you ask them to leave after that, because you can't really shoot the inmates of the convent, so it's just better to have them leave. So here, so what is a reasonable course to pursue in such instances as these? Is entirely foolish and fraught. It sounds like a sentence or something. Fraught with utmost danger, where temptations of the flesh are in question. Here every contest must be fled from, every memory expunged. It's a constant temptation of the devil to try to get you to consider something impure that may have happened in your past, that you saw somewhere or you heard about, because even when you feel completely sane, you're not interested in anything like that, to start trying to figure out, what does that mean? Why would people do that anyways? And then go through this kind of contemplating what that thing is. That's a trap, obviously. So when we notice that, you have to immediately understand where that comes from. We don't need to understand anything about the world of the flesh. Now, for those who might have the duty to talk to people on the phone or counsel or whatever else when it has to do with like married couples and the marital act, well, those people probably need to study a little bit, but then they're dealing with principles. They don't need to understand what's going on. They don't need to know how they're doing things. They need to know the principles involved and keep it on an objective level, because it's a physical, natural thing, and there's objective principles that need to be applied. That's it. They don't enter into the whole thing. They keep it on like a, I wouldn't say scientific, because but I guess it's scientific in a way. I just don't mean it in a way that people think about it. But the principles, it's completely objective, you see. But most people, that temptation coming in, we don't need to ponder. You need to identify it right away, and that could shoot away. Those don't get, we don't consider those things, because it's just a trap to pull you in. Of no such temptation did our Lord tolerate any approach, in order to warn us, never under the plea of victory and merit deliberately to involve ourselves in that quarter, that is impurity. To the very temptation itself, a large measure of delight adheres, and the sin is one to which we are all prone, and in which both mind and body find delight. So it doesn't really matter how far. This is that problem with at least the way theology of the body was presented. I don't know that much about theology of the body, but the stuff that was given to me by a priest years ago, and I listened to before I had any idea what it was, it came up to that example I've given you before. It just talked about these bishops, and this woman of the street comes out very seductively dressed, and the other bishops say, "Turn away your eyes, brother." And the one bishop just keeps looking at her and says, "I see beauty." Yeah, of course you do. That's the whole point. That's why she's dressed that way. But I don't care what kind of master you are. See, the point they're trying to make is you can become a master of the flesh, and you can, but not by looking at people that are dressed inappropriately. The fire will start. You see, we avoid those kind of things. Modesty, decency, they're all things that are very much necessary for us, and that's why it's important in the culture. So what happens when it's not in the culture? The fight happens. The fight meaning you don't look at those people. You have to decide before you leave the house. If one of us have to travel, you have to prepare yourself ahead of time. It's what I always had to do in going into Rome, because you're in a holy place with people dressed like they're on the beach. And so it's just a dangerous place to be. And once you get tired, your resolutions start to break down more. So you really have to prepare yourself ahead of time so you have the strength to endure and get through whatever you're supposed to be going through, meaning the city or whatever else it is. Because men don't arrive at a point normally. They don't arrive at some place where they can just go ahead and look at and be completely immune to the concupiscence of the flesh. It's a consequence from the Garden of Eden, and it affects everybody to a higher or lesser degree. But the moment it strikes, it's real hard to put those fires out. That's why you don't mess with them ever. You set up a discipline and resolutions for, and this is why, like Job says, he made a pact with his eyes never to look on a virgin. So to tolerate its approach is then most dangerous, for however alien an enemy it may be in itself, it has friends within the gates, or concupiscence. It has friends in the gates, meaning you have weak flesh, even though you may have lived for years and years not thinking about those things. It can just like that overcome you. This is where St. Augustine talks about the cedars of Lebanon falling. He's talking about holy men. He's talking about bishops probably. Because back then they made bishops that were really holy. You found somebody who was holy and intelligent, able to lead a flock, and they made them the bishop because he was like a mountain of sanctity. Those are the cedars of Lebanon he's talking about that have fallen because too much familiarity. Again, another reason why things that are going on in the traditional Catholic world, they're forgetting about this. Familiarity breeds contempt. We can be around the opposite sex, embrace them in public, spin them around and let their skirts fly up in the air and not have any consequence inside because it's healthy. This is healthy for us. It isn't healthy. Concupiscence is concupiscence. And men have to set up those certain guards and protections so that familiarity does not breed contempt. We don't have the familiarity so that we don't breed the contempt. But again, we've all been raised in a culture that tells us the opposite. We're raised in a culture where parents have been taught the opposite. The homeschoolers go about doing the opposite, where they're teaching them how to dance with everybody and do all the other things they have to do because they have to be socially adjusted. I was thinking about it last night because homeschoolers normally are socially adjusted. They only have to do like 2 hours of school, then they get to go play with their friends. Whereas at school, you have to sit there and be yelled at the whole time and never get to go outside and play. It's like the opposite of what a kid should be doing. So I think the kids at school, the thing is, homeschoolers probably don't get along with public schoolers that well because public schoolers they're disoriented. And I was a public schooler, but I'm telling you, I know the system there. I mean, you just sit there wasting your life away, where homeschoolers get to get their work done in 2 hours and then get to go do things that kids do. But because everyone's told that they're not actually well adjusted, they have to invent things for them to do. And I think that's why they do the dancing. because, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong on the whole thing, but it seems like an odd thing. I don't know, anyways. So to tolerate its approach is then most dangerous, for however alien an enemy it may be in itself, it has friends within the gate, or flesh. Once the least entry is allowed, the whole city falls. St. Paul says, fly fornication. Every sin that a man doth without the body. Every sin that man doth is without the body, but he that committeth fornication sinneth against his own body. 1 Corinthians 6:18. Weak, uninformed souls, in whom the love of the world is not yet dead, fall easily victim before temptations of the flesh. A still smoking candle is readily relit, and the least whisper of worldly concupiscence suffices. The least whisper of worldly concupiscence suffices. In such souls, to set the passions alight, the strong are assailed by temptation of a greater force and violence. Whispering breezes will not move them, and so the only hope of uprooting them is by temptations rough as a high wind and strong. Some temptations move by way of deception. That is, those thoughts that pop into your head where you think you have a duty to sort the thing out or to think about the thing. Next thing you know, you fall into a ditch. Cloaking evil under the guise of good. It's good to understand these things. I might have to talk to somebody about something like this someday. Simple, inexperienced souls who have not known the depths, that is, the wiles of Satan, Apocalypse 2:24, are sometimes deceived in this way. But the menace really confronts those who are more advanced in the way of perfection. Quote from the Psalm, "In this way wherein I walk, they have hidden a snare for me." That's why the discipline is so important. The discipline meaning the way to go about every single day until we die. And not depart from that discipline. When things start to encroach on us, that dryness, the whatever else it is, when we start to see something in our disposition changing, we have to realize we're being encroached on. The snares are being laid. The discipline allows us to keep going around those things. I have to act this way in community. I have to act this way with my brother. I have to act this way with myself. We do this in our cell. We do this at work. You see, you're going around the snare because you have a way of doing the thing consistently. It's not easy. I mean, sometimes we just get tired and we veer from that. But as soon as we realize we veered from it, we have to fight to get right back to where we're supposed to be. Or it just gets worse and worse and worse. And then you have to get over the humiliation afterwards of allowing yourself to get off the path. Those are good humiliations because it makes us not want to do that anymore. But this is where memory comes in. Do you see that? Sometimes some of us don't use the memory. The memory is remembering and bringing to mind those times we veered from the path and why. Those who don't use their memory keep doing the same stupid thing. They keep doing the same stupid thing over and over again, allowing themselves to get off track because they don't remember this already happened a short time ago. So identify, it's the same thing that was happening then. Memory. What do? I got to do this now. I got to counteract what I'm doing. It's just using the memory. Honestly, it sounds like a stupid thing. It sounds like a very reasonable, easy thing. This is probably the major reason some people kind of fall into the ditch because they just don't learn to use the memory. And that would mean identifying when the thing happens, why'd this happen? Not that you have to reflect on the thing too much. And usually it's coming down to pride or it's coming down to some kind of fault that's in there. And then making resolutions and putting those into place. Then when the problem comes again, remembering and going back to the same thing until you overcome it. You see that's a snare, you go around the snare. It's just cultivating the strength or the what do they call that when you have to learn how to juggle in your hands? so you don't drop the balls.
Muscle memory?
Muscle memory. Bravo. To get the muscle memory for when this thing hits me, the muscle memory just takes me around it. That's what the memory starts to cultivate. Satan himself transformed himself into an angel of light. That is the snare. That's when you see the good. So Satan himself transformed himself into an angel of light. 2 Corinthians 11:14. Because that angel of light, he turns the temptation into a good. And you don't even notice it. Because none of you are going to decide to do evil. You know, we don't decide to do evil. Even bad people don't usually decide to do evil. They're deciding to do a good. It's all perverted. So what the good is evil. But with us, it's going to be because everything just starts getting confused. And so that angel of light leads us to a temptation that we see as good because we don't understand something now. And that's something that has to be very much feared. Not feared in the sense that we're cowering. We should never cower from the devil. Feared by way of our ignorance. And that's where memory comes in. Memory, again, has to always come back to the point of remembering that we're a bit ignorant and we're easily fooled. So new things, whenever something's changing around us, like we're doing fine right now, and now we're not. Something just changed. There's an angel of light. That's the point, is to identify the thing, and then memory helps us know how to go around it. If the devil were to show himself as he is, in all his vileness, and the good would turn away at once in disgust. Should he really try? This is what you see. I mean, these people that are falling into the swing dancing, they're not thinking traditionally where the pitfalls are in it and how this modern type of dance has actually been condemned by the church. What they're doing is they're trying to see the good in it. So if they saw the evil, they wouldn't do it. These are good people. They wouldn't do that. But now everybody's just trying to say it's healthy, it's fun, it's good for you. There's good. It fosters good gender roles and all these kind of. So now you're seeing the good. There was a picture at 𝐂𝐿𝐃𝐄 in one of the monasteries there, and it was the principal image of the convent or in the church, but it was of the tree of good and evil, and it had the serpent in the tree, and it was very interesting the way they depicted this serpent. So the serpent, it was the devil, but it was a tail, a snake body tail. A snake body tail going up the tree, and as it got up to the top of the tree, it started to change into the demon. But the demon went from the snake body tail to kind of like a lady with no shirt on. But it was like a demon. But it was attractive. And that was the whole point. Like, it's trying to show you demon, but it was attractive. And that's really the way temptation always is. It's attractive. People don't want to do evil. The object of our will is good. It's goodness. It seeks goodness. And so because the object of our will is goodness, meaning we desire that which is good, it takes a great perversion for someone to seek evil. I know people think that evil is... No. How can you say that, Friar? These people, they do evil, but they see some kind of perverted good in it. So anyways, for us, the object is we seek that goodness. So if Eve saw this wicked serpent demon in the tree, she probably would have fled, but she saw something beautiful, or something, I shouldn't say beautiful, something attractive. Something that she desired. She was able to converse with this thing and then start to see the thing that she was told not to take as good. And then she took it and ate it. And so she didn't mean to do evil, right? But she allowed herself to do evil by departing from good. Even though the object, it gets confusing, doesn't it? But it's such a simple thing. It's just one of those things. Should we try to do battle with them openly? That is the vileness and what's disgusting. They would close him in, and strong in divine grace master him and put him to flight. Thus, in neither event would he make any headway, because divine grace would help us cast off the vile demon. Good men, because they are pure, hate unclean sins. And because they are manly, they put up a vigorous resistance to evil. Once they recognize it, no matter under what form. Satan then will approach disguised as a good angel, for he knows the welcome awaiting such trusty messengers of God, such bearers of fair tiding and wise counsel. Quote from St. Bernard: "Except under the guise of good, the good are not deceived. Except under the guise of good, the good are not deceived." The good don't accept evil. They'll fight it with everything in their worth, but they'll accept good that's disguised. They'll accept evil that's disguised as good. That's from the Sermons on the Canticles, number 66. The more effectively to secure his purpose, the devil begins with suggestions that are wholly good. The same thing with Eve. He gave her a good suggestion. Then a stray admixture of evil is introduced. Then positive evil, but somehow still cloaked as good. Till firmly, when he holds his victim securely trapped, he throws off all concealment, lifts his poisonous head, and enfolds them utterly in sin. It's terrifying. But we shouldn't shun this. This is what he does to good people. The scorpion is a harmless enough looking creature. It's actually kind of a silly creature. It's got this big tail, it seems very awkward. They can slip in and out of stuff because they're super duper thin. Lifts his poisonous head and enfolds them. The scorpion is a harmless enough looking creature, but has a deadly poison in his tail. And we are reminded here of the 𝐂𝐃𝐄. And although really an enemy race, okay, so they're not the 10 bears, hoodwinked the children of Israel into a promise that their lives would be spared. Joshua chapter 9. How many, under pretext of spiritual friendship and of mutual help and prayer, have become dangerously involved with pious women? It begins as a pure work of charity and zeal. Remember that priest who was with he had a famous TV show and everything. He rediscerned his priestly vocation to marry some lady. And then she divorced him, and he went to jail. And I think now he sells Red Bull. Because that was from spiritual direction, helping the lady out. See, men have especially a man who's willing to give his life to the priesthood. You have someone who wants to help. They're willing to throw themselves into the trenches and be killed for the good of somebody else, essentially, offer their life up for the priesthood and religious life. So you have that same kind of chivalry in dealing with women. However, men naturally feel inclined towards helping the weaker. So now he's given spiritual direction to a woman who's weaker. She's going through difficult things. He starts to fall into the clutches of the whole thing. And then finally leaves his vocation, marries her. Then there's a huge falling out. He goes to jail. And now he sells Red Bull. Crazy. Oh, man. I mean, you think it's nuts, but nobody would have thought that before it happened. This person was on TV and doing all kinds of great stuff, talking to people about holy things. It was a famous show. And then now the guy sells Red Bull. It just changes just like that. Father 𝐂𝐃𝐄, I've heard he's back in the monastery. I don't know if it's true, but I've heard he's back in the monastery doing penance and praying, which would be a wonderful thing. He was a famous catechist and stuff like that, preacher. But then he started, he was leading all of these people. Even Cardinal Burke told me I was a follower. I was a follower of Father Karapi because he really liked what he had to say, the way his teaching and stuff like that. Next thing you know, he's got like a mansion in Montana, all kinds of SUVs, and leaves the priesthood, and then shows up on the internet as the black sheepdog in biker leather, and starts riding Harleys. What happened there? I mean, I'm not laughing at that. What a terrible thing. He did such a beautiful thing. His catechisms were wonderful. And then they became hunting stories. Because if you don't stay sharp on that conversion, if you don't stay sharp on that desire for holiness, the devil just makes it all go away. Because you'll just follow it little by little. Super dangerous. It begins as a pure work of charity and zeal. Then the conversations become prolonged. This is that involvement with a pious woman. And God ceases to be quite the sole subject of them. There are suggestions of mutual devotion and loyalty. Looks becoming, is it amorous or amorous? Amorous. Tiny presents are exchanged by way of tokens of affection. Watch how good is becoming very much intermixed with evil. Spiritual advice and love of souls with useless talk and unwise familiarity. And how the heart is abruptly affired by an interest wholly new. Evil enters now, cloaked, though but thinly, and embraced. An embrace, a kiss, a fondling touch of the hand. Under such conditions, these are acts always suspect, signs of carnal affection, preludes to sin. This does not tarry, but throwing off all disguise, fruit of what has gone before enters the soul, and sins against chastity ensue. Not in this matter alone, but where the other vices also are concerned, pride, for example, envy or avarice, the same process may be observed. Where the least hint of evil is held in horror, open temptation is plainly useless. And unless the temptation assumes some sort of appearance of good, it will be recognized for what it is at once. Before the assassin can murder his host, he must first gain entry by posing as a friend. So by guile was Amasa slain. For when Joab approached and thought to kiss him on the chin, he was utterly unsuspecting of any evil and paid no heed to the dagger. 2 Kings 29. So with a kiss did Judas betray Christ to be crucified. From 3 points of view, temptation are grievous to us. This is the effort of conflict in the first place and consequent anxiety. There is the dread of defeat and the consenting of evil. And finally, there is disquiet of soul, lest after all we did not perhaps put our best into our resistance. Read that last part again. And finally, there is the disquiet of soul, lest after all we did not perhaps put our best into resistance. So it's a reminder that our whole purpose of our life, whether religious life or people out in the world, whether if you're a Christian, that is a Catholic in the true faith, our whole purpose is to go to heaven, and everyone's forgetting it. Everyone's forgetting it. Everything's on the natural now. As long as people get their Latin Mass, they're fine, but there's no striving for holiness. There's no desire for the more perfect. Like the beautiful example of the little children of Fatima. You read their everything. They're willing to give up everything just to make reparation for sin, or to save people from hell, or to appease an offended God. Who wants to appease the offended God now? Nobody talks about that. Nobody talks about appeasing an offended God. But that's something we should think about quite often. Anyone who wants to be a true servant of God, whether in the religious state or out in the world, it's not about just getting what they want liturgically or sacramentally. It's about offering their life as a sacrifice to God because he's offended. But God shouldn't be offended for anything. But the whole world's becoming a big offense, even those in religion. Even those who consider themselves the quote-unquote remnant. Holiness is really the only way forward. And so for us in the religious state, I think, it's something that we individually have to look at. The group can't make you holy. Holiness itself can only come from the individual who puts these things into practice and strives with all their might to make reparation for sin, to pray that souls don't go to hell, and to appease an offended God. And that's why we make our consecration to Our Ladies. What's more pleasing to God than to put yourself completely at her disposition and service for the salvation of souls?